Hi Internet, welcome to the Troyan YouTube channel here with another book review. So you know what's totally not divisive? Politics. So I read The War on Normal People by Andrew Yang, read a digital copy of it that I was gifted, and I would say that this is one of the best books I've ever read on the modern state of the just America and our society and where things are going. And basically, this is one of the best books about economics I've read in a long time. And so, this was one where I think I got through the entire thing in a day because it was just, it was so good. Politically, I think that Andrew Yang was, the big surprise for me this year in terms of the Democratic nominees. If I had to describe myself on the political spectrum, I would say I'm a progressive, but maybe not in the way that you think necessarily. So the candidates that I liked this election cycle were Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, and Andrew Yang. So basically, all the people who the establishment Democrats and the establishment Republicans hated. Those were the guys that guys and gals. I'm like, man, if the establishment hates them, they must be doing something right. But I think that Andrew Yang, more than any other candidate, really understood where the economy was and where the economy was heading, and what steps needed to be done in order to prevent a complete collapse for the working class. And so that was what really appealed to me about him as a candidate, is that he recognized where the automation crisis was taking us, where the shrinking, manufacturing jobs were disappearing and how they weren't coming back. How self-driving trucks would be eliminating jobs for truckers. Automation would be getting rid of jobs for call center workers and restaurant employees. And just how they wouldn't be replaced, and how we were about to enter into a new industrial revolution that would displace a number of workers and potentially lead to an economic collapse. And he was also a candidate who, while he recognized these issues, also offered what he thought were solutions to these issues. And also outlined how those solutions would be paid for. And so his sort of pragmatism and just he was talking about stuff that no other candidate was even bringing up, but some things that I had been noticing trending for a long time, and so he really spoke to that, and so that's why I really believed in his candidacy, mainly because I really liked the policy agenda that he was pushing forward. And so his book was really sort of going into greater detail about where he sees the specific problems and where he sees it going and what he sees are potential solutions for those problems. And so, a lot of candidates, they sound really terrible in a soundbite. But when they actually have time to expound upon their ideas, you're like, oh, that person has a good point. Oh, I didn't realize, that's what they were really saying. And so when you read this book, in many ways it's very bleak, because if nothing is done about these issues, I, in some ways, fear a societal collapse where the system of capitalism would not sustain itself, and the American structure that I've lived in my entire life would no longer function. And so there's a part of me that doesn't want that to happen, because I fear for the civil unrest it would bring, and so I want to avoid those French Revolution worker uprising scenarios, because I feel that it would just be disastrous for the country. And so I am a guy who in my opinion preventative, look at the problems and try to prevent it from getting worse. And so that's one of the reasons why I really liked his candidacy, because he recognized where things were going. He was very much a candidate of the future. But I don't want to sell Andrew Yang the man too much, because this is a book review, and so I want to more sell the book as to whether or not I think you should read it. And this is a high recommendation from me, especially for American citizens. So sort of take the political aspect out of it and just look at this as very informational, where Andrew Yang was a guy who's very familiar with tech, with Silicon Valley, with that crowd, and an entrepreneur. So he was a businessman who just entered into the political arena because he saw a problem and felt that it was his, it was his civic duty to try to fix it, because he realized that the free market only has so much power, and that at a certain point you do need the federal government to step in. I do believe there's a balance. I don't believe in too much federal government, but I also don't believe in completely unregulated capitalism. In that, child safety labor laws are ultimately a good thing. That is a regulation on capitalism, and I think there's a balance. And I think this book really nails what the problems are and how the market doesn't have the incentive to fix those problems, because a company's incentive is to just make as much profit as possible, and they're not necessarily concerned with how that affects the workers. So if you can automate something and get rid of jobs and save the company money, and that is ultimately good for your bottom line, that is what a business has the incentive to do, not to hire more people. The business, their goal is to maximize profits and keep the lowest cost possible. And so if you can get the same job done with a robot that you could with 15 employees, you're going to fire those 15 employees. But when you have the job market shifting so much, shifting so rapidly, and jobs that were once in vogue are no longer in demand, it's not realistic to expect people to obtain those new job skills. And as jobs keep disappearing, it's a slippery slope, and the book explains it much better than I do. And so I would really recommend, looking into this book, reading it. I would say this is an essential read. It's a high recommendation from me, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum. If you care about the working class, this book is chock full of information, numbers, hard facts, and yes, Yang's opinion on them, but I feel like most Americans, whether or not they agree with his solutions to these problems, I think they would definitely agree to his assessment of what the problems are and where we're headed. And I think that to be that forward thinking is really impressive, and especially in regards to let's take, for example, the universal basic income thing, which is the sort of the centerpiece of his campaign. A lot of people called it too radical and too crazy of an idea. But then with COVID-19, as a bunch of people's jobs disappeared, universal basic income all of a sudden seemed like a good idea, at least getting us through the pandemic. A lot of other countries did provide UBI for their citizens getting through the pandemic. And the stimulus check was an example of a form of universal basic income, albeit it was a one-time check, but it was something that really helped, stimulate the economy, keep people in their homes, provide food for people. Like, that was huge. And if you think about it this way, where COVID-19 caused a bunch of people to lose their jobs immediately, a lot of those jobs that were lost were like, service industry jobs, are jobs that are in danger of being automated that would be lost. And so we've seen the effectiveness of universal basic income as helping transition people into new lines of work and easing that transition, so it's not just the bottom falling out from society completely. And when you get that many people, with basically no economic prospects, and you've got the wealthy people getting wealthier and the bottom people, with nothing, that's going to, in my opinion, lead to too much civil unrest. And I feel that is ultimately unsafe for the republic. And as someone who enjoys the benefits of capitalism. Without, capitalism, I wouldn't have these great books, this great record, the great video games. There's so many great pieces of art that are commercially sold. I enjoy, being able to buy different kinds of food. I enjoy the freedom of the market. And so because I want to keep the market, I don't want there to be like a socialist uprising, like the kind of socialist uprising that a lot of right-leaning people fear, I feel will happen if we don't offer more protections to the working class. And so I think that's why I think this book is a high recommendation from me, because I think the more people are informed about these issues and make their electoral decisions based upon their information, I think will ultimately be led to a better place. And I'm very glad that universal basic income has become an issue that has been pushed forward into the mainstream. So this book, it's a high recommendation from me. Yeah, I think it's really, really excellent, worth your time. I knocked it out in a day, so it's you can get it done in a day or two fairly easily. Great book and high recommendation. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Let's see how the comments are for this one. Yay, politics. Do the liking, the commenting, the subscribe, and all those things. And have a good one, everyone. Bye.